All right, let's go live. Hello, everybody. Chuck Holton here. I'm coming to you from my hotel room in Copenhagen, Denmark tonight. And there's no desk in this room because it's a European hotel room and it's the size of a shoebox. So I have to do this with the computer perched on top of the refrigerator. But we'll make do. Thank you very much for watching. Please do me a favor and post where you're coming in from in the chat. And that way we can see where people are from all over the place. Also, make sure that you hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and all that good stuff. Now, President Trump has been talking a lot lately about Greenland. This is his flavor of the month, I guess. If you think back 6-8 months ago, we were talking about, oh no, it was more than that, a year ago, we were talking about taking over Panama, taking over the Panama Canal. We're going to take it back. We are taking it back, is what he said. And we haven't taken it back. Now, it's instructive to look at how that actually went, because what we did do is we got Panama to stop doing so much business with China, which is essentially what President Trump probably wanted anyway. But he went ahead and started demonizing Panama, made everybody run around with their hair on fire. He really, really likes to do business that way. If you read The Art of the Deal, that's kind of a thing with him, is you make outlandish demands and make people freak out. And then, hang on, I'm going to get a drink here. Is that a water, I hope? I don't know. I can't read it. Well, I guess we'll find out. You make outlandish demands. Yeah, it's water. And then you sort of backtrack from there. I'm not sure that works as well in geopolitics as it works in real estate, but that's his style. That's the way it goes. Now, I talked yesterday about all the reasons why Greenland is important for America. And it's important for the Western world because the ice sheets are melting up in the north. And so that's opening up sea lanes that weren't there before. That's dramatically going to shorten the amount of time it takes to get cargo here and there. And so obviously every country wants to control that if they can. There are 8 countries that have frontage, real estate on the Arctic. And then China is trying to position itself as an Arctic country, even though they don't have anything in the Arctic. So that would make 9. Now, if it comes to, oh gosh, President Trump's talking about, well, Russia and China are going to take over Greenland if we don't. And I talked a little bit about that yesterday, why that's not really the case, because Greenland is a part of NATO because it belongs to Denmark. And as such, no Russian or Chinese forces are going to be able to take it over without triggering a massive war between all the NATO countries, which represents 60% of the total military force on planet Earth, and China or Russia. And neither China nor Russia wants to get into a scrap like that. So now the Greenlanders actually sit right next to what they call the GIUK corridor, which is kind of the gateway to the North Sea, to the Baltics there. And it's important because that's where Russian subs come and go. And obviously we all want to keep an eye on that. That's it's between Greenland, Iceland, and UK. Okay, GIUK corridor. The thing is, we're already keeping an eye on it, and so is the rest of NATO. And so, while it's important, I'm going to talk today about why President Trump is going about this all wrong. And so if you're a sycophant of President Trump and you cannot stand to hear any criticism of our president, then you probably want to stop watching now, because I'm going to be criticizing President Trump pretty strongly today. I support President Trump when he does something smart. Taking out Nicolas Maduro was a great thing. We talked a lot about that last week when I was in Colombia. And some of his economic policies and everything just make me giddy. I love it. So I praise him when he does something smart, and I'm going to criticize him when he does something really, really spectacularly stupid, which is what I believe he's doing with this talk about militarily taking over Greenland and all that. So first, I want to show you what President Trump said today, which he doubled down on this and even said he's going to put tariffs on countries that don't support his plan to buy Greenland.
Tariff, which is, by the way, about 7 times more than they would have to pay by raising their drug, like 7 times. This wasn't like a little bit more, 7 times more. And I may do that for Greenland, too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. I'll give you a little, I'll take you out of that. In fact, that'll end up being the story. But actually, this is a much bigger story because we're reducing healthcare by...
Okay, so he just sort of said that off the cuff. He was actually talking about healthcare, but he's like, yeah, I may put tariffs on countries that don't support our plan to take over Greenland. Now, you've probably heard quite a bit about this story already, but for those of you who haven't, I'm going to go ahead and back up a little bit and sort of give you a little history of what's been going on here. First of all, this is not the first time the United States has tried to buy Greenland. We tried back in the 1800s to buy it for $100 million in gold, and the Greenlanders turned it down, or the Dutch turned it down. It's also not the first time the United States has purchased a territory from Denmark. The U.S. Virgin Islands used to be the Danish Virgin Islands, and in like 1916, we purchased the Virgin Islands from Denmark for $25 million worth of gold coins. You heard that right, gold coins. That had to be a significant shipment of gold. So, you could try to make the case that, well, I mean, Denmark didn't have a problem selling us the Virgin Islands, and there were people living there at the time, so we were buying and selling people. But I think the world has moved on from the whole buying and selling people bit. 1916, 1917, that was still a thing. Now, not so much. And now, in his defense, Greenland is actually closer to the United States than it is to Denmark. Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, where I'll be in a day or two, is closer to New York City than it is to Copenhagen. But just because they're in the neighborhood doesn't necessarily give us the right to steal it, to try to take it or buy it, especially if they don't want to be bought. I mean, it's one thing if they agree to be bought, but if they don't agree to be bought, then we don't have the right to just take it. Making the case that, well, we have to take Greenland because we need it is exactly the case that Vladimir Putin made in trying to take Ukraine. And morally, that was pretty gross. And a lot of people died. The Ukrainians don't want to be Russian. As bad as Vladimir Putin thinks he needs it, he doesn't get to do that. You don't get to just take your neighbor country because you think you need it. That'd be like if I had a good friend who had a real nice beach house down at the beach, and he said, hey, man, you can use the beach house anytime you want. Here's the keys. Got your own set of keys. Anytime you want it, you guys use it. Go down there for the weekend, enjoy yourselves, whatever. And so we've been doing that for years. And then, my health is kind of deteriorating maybe a little bit. And so the doctor says, you need to get more sun. So I go to my friend and I say, hey, doctor says I got to get more sun. I need to live at the beach. So I'm just going to move in to your house and just take it. It's just my house now. And my friend's like, whoa, hang on a minute. I was nice enough to give you the keys and let you use it anytime you want to take a vacation there, I didn't mean you could keep it. I didn't mean it belonged to you. And I say, yeah, I know, but I need it now. So it does belong to me because I need it. That's not how it works. That's immoral to do that. So even if the United States needs Greenland for national security, we still don't have the right to take it by force or by coercion or by, putting tariffs on people until they, scream for mercy. We don't have the right to do that as a nation. That is immoral to even talk like that. Now, President Trump is likely doing what he does all the time, and that's, start with a really big, audacious goal that really makes the Democrats set their hair on fire and get their undies in a wad. And then he's going to walk it back and we'll, have some talks. The thing that's different about this is that Greenland is our friend, and they've been our friend for a long time. And they've already given us the keys to Greenland and said, you guys can bring as many troops up here as you want. You can put them on bases. You can, use Greenland for whatever you need. They've given us carte blanche. And in fact, during the Cold War, we had between 6,000 and 10,000 troops stationed at 17 different bases around Greenland. I showed you the map of that yesterday. So if we really thought it was that important, then we should just build more bases up there, put more troops up there. And all we had to do was send Marco Rubio to Copenhagen and say, hey, we'd like to open some more bases up there. And they would have been like, sure, fine. But by couching it this way, you make the Greenlanders and you make the Danes the bad guy here. All of a sudden, our friend is like, we're your friend. What are you talking about us like that for? Now, Stephen Miller, the deputy chief of staff for the White House, went on, I think, Fox News and talked about this. And I want to break down his arguments because a lot of them are just straw man arguments as we listen to this. So I'm going to stop it a little bit along the way.
It is essential for America's national security.
Okay, that does not give America the right to take it.
The new domain of international competition is going to be polar competition. That is where more and more resources are being spent by our nation's adversaries and rivals.
That's true, but that still doesn't give us the right to steal somebody else's land.
The ability to control movement, navigation, lanes of travel in the polar and Arctic regions.
So why not Canada? Canada's got more land on the northern region than Greenland does. So why don't we just take over Canada? They probably would like it. Well, maybe they wouldn't, but I'm sure we have some Canadians watching, and they're pretty upset at President Trump because of the whole tariff thing, and he said some really not nice things about them. Again, what is the profit in alienating our longtime staunch allies? I realize that Canadians have voted in a bunch of liberal whack jobs over the last many years. And so they're quite a bit more liberal, at least the ones who are winning the votes, than we would like. And that's an issue. But that doesn't mean that they're no longer an ally. They've been an ally for a long time. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Just keep going.
Greenland is 25% larger than Alaska. Greenland is the size of 1/4 of the continental United States.
So what?
With respect to Denmark, Denmark is a tiny country with a tiny economy and a tiny military. They cannot defend Greenland. They cannot control the territory of Greenland. Under every understanding of law that has existed about territorial control for 500 years, to control a territory, you have to be able to defend a territory, improve a territory, inhabit a territory. Denmark has failed on every single one of these tests.
Okay, so that's just false. There is no international law that says that in order for you to be considered the owner of a territory, you have to have troops stationed all over there, and you have to be actively colonizing it and growing the population there. The population of Greenland is about 53,000 people. It's about the size of La Crosse, Wisconsin. But they are Greenlanders, and many of them are Inuit that have been there for their families and ancestors have been there for centuries, if not millennia. So the Greenlanders do inhabit Greenland, and Denmark does protect Greenland. Denmark has many more troops in Greenland than we do. They have a patrol that goes year-round on dog sleds all the way around the most remote parts of Greenland to make sure that there's no funny business going on with China and Russia. Now, that doesn't mean Greenland doesn't necessarily need to have the force to be able to fight off China and Russia, because if that was the standard, then virtually no country in NATO by itself would qualify to own its own land. We could use this argument Stephen Miller is making to say, if you don't have enough troops to defend it, from whom? From our adversaries, Russia and China. If you don't have enough troops to defend your country, then you don't get to keep your country. Well, if that's the case, then, Belgium, we should take over Belgium. We should take over the Netherlands. We should take over France, although nobody would really want it. We should take over Spain and Portugal. We should take over Italy. Look, none of those countries on their own have the ability to defend their country against all enemies outside of their country. And that's why we have NATO. That's what NATO is all about. His argument is trying to make the case that America is the only country that has the ability in NATO to defend a place like Greenland. Now, one other thing he's not pointing out here is that one of the reasons that Denmark doesn't have more troops in Greenland is because we told them they didn't need to, because we would take care of it. So we have a status of forces agreement with them where we told them through NATO. The commander of NATO is an American general, right? You know that all NATO forces serve under an American general. Did you know that? And that American general meets with the militaries of every nation in NATO, and they divvy up where troops ought to go and where they ought to be to make all of NATO as safe as possible. And we talked to Denmark and said, tell you what, why don't you guys send your troops over to Latvia or Lithuania or down there on the border with Russia over there to protect against Russia, and we'll take care of Greenland. Don't worry about it. We got Greenland covered. And so they said, okay. And so they don't keep as many troops in Greenland as they would otherwise because we told them not to. Guess what else we told them? And this goes back to keeping our commitments. When we bought the Virgin Islands in 1916 from Denmark, one of the stipulations in the contract when we turned over our $25 million in gold coins was that we would recognize Denmark's sovereignty over Greenland. And not in so many words, but that was the spirit of the agreement that we made with them, is that you guys we will call Greenland Denmark's from now on. We will agree that Greenland belongs to Denmark if you will sell us the Virgin Islands. And Denmark agreed to that. Now you might say, well, that was we made that promise a long time ago. We can break that promise now. Why? What's changed? Nothing. Nothing morally has changed. And I believe as a country, the United States should keep its word. So let's keep listening to Stephen Miller here.
To spend hundreds of billions of dollars defending a territory for them that is 25% bigger than Alaska at 100% American expense, but they say, while we do this, it belongs 100% to Denmark.
Okay, so that's never been what Denmark has asked for us to do, or Greenland. We've never said, please, we just want the United States to spend all the money to defend Greenland. As a matter of fact, the amount of money that we spend defending Greenland, we've been spending defending Greenland, is actually just a drop in the bucket in terms of our total budget. It's very, very, very small in terms of our military budget. Denmark, on the other hand, subsidizes Greenland because they don't have any real industry up there. It used to be, like seal blubber and ivory from the tusks and stuff, but there's not much of a market for that anymore. So they're not self-sustaining in Greenland. And so Denmark gives Greenland $700 million a year just to keep everything running up there. So Denmark's got a lot more skin in the game in Greenland than the United States does, by a long shot. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
It's a raw deal. It's an unfair deal.
Okay, so that's it. That's all he had to say. So obviously, he's engaging in, he has to do this or he'll get fired. He's got to come up with an argument to try to justify President Trump's blatherings. But these arguments don't hold water. And people know that. I mean, they're not fooling anybody. Now, there was a group of American politicians who are here today in Copenhagen, bipartisan group. They had 11 politicians from the Senate and the Congress who came over to came over to Copenhagen to talk to the Danish prime minister and say, look, we're not on board with this. Don't worry. We're not going to invade Greenland. Okay. Just, they said, we're going to try to cool the temperature a little bit in this, this whole thing. And so I had a longer clip, but I didn't want to bore you guys with 4 minutes of a Democrat speaking. I can hardly stand to listen to Democrats, even when I agree with what they're saying. So I got this off CNN. Don't flame me for that, but this is a shorter clip of that. So
we are grateful for your hospitality, for 225 years of being a good and trusted ally and partner. We had a strong and robust dialogue about how we extend that into the future. We expressed our gratitude for the sacrifice of Danes who served and fought and died alongside Americans when we were attacked 25 years ago. We spoke about the value of NATO and the commitment to respecting the core principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and self-determination.
Okay, so obviously there are a lot of politicians in the United States, both Republicans and Democrats, who are not on board with this. They control the power of the purse. That's Congress's job. And so if we were going to buy Greenland, they would have to approve that sale, which they're talking about somewhere in the range of $700 billion with a B. Now, let me ask you, how do you feel about the United States spending nearly $1 trillion, $750 billion to buy a giant hunk of ice that, oh, by the way, is melting at the rate of 280 tons of ice a day? How many of you would be on board with that? Let's just post in the chat there. I see somebody's here saying Trump hasn't used force against Greenland. Those are opening positions in negotiations, not promises. Very true. My point is that they are immoral opening gambits in a negotiation. They are lies. He's not going to use military force to take over Greenland. So he's lying. And even hinting at it is just plain immoral. Again, it's just like hinting that you're going to take over your neighbor's beach house that he's been letting you use for free for years. It's wrong to do that. Okay. And it's really caused a lot of consternation among Danes because, about 90% of Danish people speak English. They love America. I was at a protest against President Trump today with about 10,000 people. And I have to say it was the most orderly and calm protest that I've ever been to in my life. I thought maybe they were all Canadian or something because, The Canadians are real nice like that. They're like the nice North Americans. Well, Danes are nice like Canadians. They just they were more bewildered than angry. And I have a couple clips here to show you what I'm talking about. But first, let's see here. I want to play this one.
So there are about 10,000 people that have come out in front of the American embassy here in Copenhagen to protest
right behind me.
President Trump's threats to take over Greenland. But in talking to these people, they're not so much mad as they are just sort of befuddled. They don't understand. They thought we were friends, and now it seems like they're being made into the bad guy here. So there's a delegation of more than 10 American congressmen and senators who came over to Copenhagen to meet today with the Prime Minister and other people in the government in order to try to smooth out the relations a little bit and, as they say, lower the temperature.
So that was me talking outside the protest, and you can hear the protest going on in the background, but it's not like a bunch of people screaming. They're standing right in front of the American embassy, which was closed, ironically, so there was like nobody there. But they were out there, they're chanting and they were waving flags and signs and stuff, but really they were just kind of disappointed. And so here's a couple of quotes from people that I talked to in the protest today.
Sad about the situation, actually. I'm a nurse. I've been working in Greenland quite many times, and I love the country, I love the people, and it's just too much. You cannot buy a country, you cannot buy people. We're not buying and selling people anymore. So no, it's too much.
So you decided to come out here for...
Yeah, to show the flag.
Say that again?
To show the flag and to show my solidarity.
Oh, good.
Because I think maybe sometimes Greenlanders, they feel very lonely. It's far away. And now they can see we are here. We are thinking of you.
So obviously that was the sentiment that I heard over and over and over again, is that we came out to show solidarity with people from Greenland. Here's another guy who actually has a pretty big following on Instagram too.
To protest against the Americans trying to take Greenland. Or
why?
the U.S. government, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and tell me about that. There's a separation there, right?
Yes, there is. So from what I can tell, it's about 1 in 5 American who actually wants U.S. to take Greenland. And I'm happy about that because there is a lot of going on in America right now. And yeah, it's rough.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so, this is what I heard over and over and over again. Now, I want to get into something that's really the crux of why this bothers me so much. Stephen Miller, all the guys going on the talk shows and everything are talking about, what has Greenland ever done for us? What has Denmark ever done for us? They're a tiny country. They're not worth anything. They can't help. Well, you know what? That's not what we were saying after 9/11. When the Twin Towers came down, the United States invoked Article 5 of NATO for the first and only time in its history. And we asked all of the NATO countries to help us go fight the Taliban in Afghanistan. And they all came running. They all came to our aid. Denmark, including people from Greenland, sent approximately 18,000 people over the course of the war to Afghanistan alone. 18,000 people. And they weren't sitting in Kabul behind a desk somewhere pushing papers. There were a lot of countries like Germany that was like, yeah, okay, we'll send people, but they can't go fight. We won't allow them to go fight, so they have to do like admin stuff. They'll fix vehicles and then guard concrete blocks and whatever. But Denmark was not one of those countries. Denmark said, we will come, send us to the most hot places you can, and we will fight. And I found some video of Danish forces. Now, I saw it when I was in Afghanistan many times. because I was always going to Helmand province. That's where, is kind of the hottest area in especially 2006, 2007 time frame. And I saw Danish troops there, and they were great. They were very professional, and they did a great job. Here's what it looked like. Well, hold on, we got to get rid of that guy. No, we got rid of him. Okay, this is. This is actual combat footage from Afghanistan. Now, I'm going to put that up like this because it'll probably get me demonetized if I leave it up there too long. But these guys saw some very heavy combat. And between the troops that they sent to Afghanistan and they had a smaller contingent in Iraq, they lost about 50 soldiers killed and many more wounded. Now, you might say, well, that's not very much. There was a grand total of like 4,000 that were the United States lost in Afghanistan. Yes, but if you take it on a per capita basis, based on the population of the country, Denmark lost more people in Afghanistan per capita than any other NATO country. Okay, so they made huge sacrifices. They gave their sons to us to help us in our time of need. And this is how we repay them. By saying, great, yeah, you guys suck. You can't even protect a sheet of ice the size of Texas, so we're going to take it over. After they've already been like, you guys can bring all the troops up here you want. Like, go ahead. Now, the thing that people in Greenland, I'm going to go to Greenland in a couple days, and I'm going to bring you some more reporting on the ground there. But, the thing about Greenland is that they kind of want to be their own country. The problem is they can't support themselves yet. And Denmark doesn't have a problem with that. They don't have a problem with letting them become their own sovereign nation at some point. And they've actually got them on a plan. They've been on a plan for many years that step by step is turning over little by little more responsibility to the Greenlanders for their own sovereignty. They can make their own laws. They can govern themselves. They can have their own police force. Little by little, they are gaining their sovereignty. And you might say, well, why don't they just give it to them immediately, give them full sovereignty? Well, because they still are reliant on Denmark to survive. Again, that's $700 million a year that Denmark gives to Greenland to help them pay for everything. But they're in the process of developing their fishing and developing other income streams there. Be a great place to put data centers, for example. You get free cooling. And so they are on the road to get to the point where they can govern themselves and be a self-supporting, self-sufficient nation on their own. That's what the Greenlanders want. They don't want to be part of America. Now, just imagine the Greenlanders pay about the same amount of taxes as people in the United States do. Although in the United States, we're better at hiding it. We're better at taxing you and not calling it taxes. So, you add up road tolls and travel taxes and cell phone taxes and sales taxes and property taxes and personal property taxes and gas taxes and just on and on and on and on and on. If you add that up, the average American pays more than 40% of his income in taxes. And if you make decent money, that can go as high as 70%, depending on where you live. Greenlanders pay about 40% in taxes as well. However, what do they get for their 40%? They get free education, they get and higher education, they get free health care, and a lot of other sort of benefits that are provided for them for their taxes. Americans don't get that. So that's one reason why if you ask Greenlanders, I asked one guy today, and he didn't even speak English. He only spoke Greenlandic or whatever their language is called. But through a translator, he told me, we don't want to be part of America. We want to be our own country. Why would we go be a part of America where we have to pay the same amount of taxes and we get a whole lot less for it? He had a point. Taxes are a big deal. Now, what if President Trump might be able to change their minds and get them to decide, maybe it would be better to be part of America if he said something like, for every Greenlander that is alive on Greenland when we take it over, you will never have to pay taxes for the rest of your life. Now, anybody born after the day we take over, they will have to pay taxes like a regular American. But anybody that's alive, that's living there, will not have to pay any taxes. And to sweeten the pot a little more, waive their property taxes too. Tell them they don't have to pay any property taxes. If that were the case, you'd see a gold rush of people moving to Greenland. I would probably move to Greenland before the cutoff date just to take advantage of that deal. Okay? But, the thing is, bottom line is, folks, President Trump is not going to take over Greenland. Mark my words. If we end up owning Greenland by the end of Trump's term, I will eat my hat. I mean, it's not going to happen because it would have to be approved by our Congress, and they're not going to approve it. Bipartisan, both Democrats and Republicans are against it. Now, many Republicans are being a little quiet about it. Not all of them. There are a couple on this delegation that's here right now. One from North Carolina and Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. And actually, I think I have Lisa Murkowski, or I did. Oh, no, I didn't put it in here. I've got her saying something. Now, so I think we've made the case. Denmark does not want to give it up. The people that live in Greenland do not want to they don't want to be American. We already agreed years ago, and not just in 1916, but also in 1951 and in the 1990s, we agreed that Denmark would maintain control of Greenland, and we would just have forces there if we wanted to. We don't need it. We don't need to spend $700 billion buying it because we can still bring all the troops we want up there. We just can't have nuclear bombs up there. That's the only thing that the Danes asked, is just please don't station any nuclear bombs in Greenland. And we agreed to that. So it doesn't make sense for us to spend $700 billion on something we already have for free. It would not materially change what we can do there except for the nuclear bomb issue, and that's not really an issue. You don't really need that. So now when I get to Greenland, I'm going to show you that there's no China and Russia there. Russia is increasing its presence in the North Sea, which is between Greenland and Russia. And China is doing patrols up there too. But that's a lot different than taking over Greenland. Russia and China are not going to take over Greenland because Greenland is part of NATO. And if they did, there would be a war between all the NATO countries and Russia or China. So they're not going to do that. Now, China was trying to sort of worm its way under the tent, so to speak, by paying for the construction of an airport in Greenland. The United States under the first Trump administration heard about that and gave a phone call to the Danish prime minister and said, that's a non-starter. And the Danish prime minister shut it off and kicked out China. Later on I think during the Biden administration, China tried to move some Chinese companies in and start developing rare earth mineral mines. And Biden administration gave him a call and said, don't do that. And Greenland kicked out China immediately, just kicked them out. They're done. And China lost all their investment and everything. So they are not taking over Greenland. They certainly would like to have their fingers in Greenland, but wanting to do something and being able to do it are two very different things. And that applies to President Trump as well. Now, one last thing before we get to our questions, and that is there was another protest in Copenhagen today. At the same time this protest was going on in front of the U.S. Embassy, a couple miles away, there was another protest that was a pro-America protest that had nothing to do with Greenland and actually didn't have anything to do with Denmark either. So what it was, let's see, and I have some footage here I can show you of that. Oh, first I wanted to show you footage of the anti-Trump rally, just because I showed you some quotes, but I didn't show you what the actual rally looked like. So there were about 10,000 people there, and they were there for hours in 37-degree weather.
Greenland is not for sale.
They're saying Greenland is not for sale.
Greenland is not for sale.
And wow, who knew? They didn't burn anything down. They didn't spray paint cars. They didn't, attack anybody. They got a permit. The police came early and set up barriers and said, okay, this is where the protest is going to be. They set up a stage and they had their protest and they waved their flags and then they went home. That's what a protest should look like. They didn't even make a lot of noise. For the people that lived there, were probably not all that disturbed. Why is it that in the United States we put up with protests that actually are riots, where they're burning cars, they're attacking people, they're throwing bottles and rocks, they're attacking the law enforcement? There was none of that here today. It felt so civilized, and it just made me hurt for America, because it's like, why can't America? America does have protests like that. It's whenever people on the right protest in America, it looks like what you saw there. People just smiling, having a good time, coming out to show their support for whatever the cause is. Why is it when the left decides to protest, that's when things start burning and law enforcement gets attacked? The law enforcement that is there to protect them gets attacked. Why is that? Because leftism is a mental illness, I believe. Now, okay, so let me show you the other protest I went to. Like I said, it didn't have anything to do with Denmark. It didn't have anything to do with, let's see, I've got it here somewhere. Oh, here it is. Okay, so the other protest I went to looked like this. So this one was a little bit more active, and the building you see in the background there is the Iranian embassy. And these are Iranians that came out to protest the Iranian embassy and to call on President Trump to put his money where his mouth is and actually do what he said he would do and come to the aid of people in Iran. Now, let's see if I can get rid of that one. Thank you, Nate. So let's put this one up.
Myself.
Okay.
So fluent in English, of course.
Right.
So Chuck, pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Now, just tell me what's going on here.
We're standing here today as part of a worldwide protest action against the terrorist regime in Iran, the so-called Islamic regime. We have no respect for those people. They are murdering our civilians, our brothers, our sisters, our sons and our daughters in the streets. Civilian protesters are being murdered with automatic weapons manned by terrorist Hamas organizations imported by the Islamic regime to Iran to kill their own civilians, because they know that no Iranian soldier will aim a weapon at his fellow brothers and sisters.
Right. So what are you calling on President Trump to do?
Well, we're calling on President Trump to keep his word. He said help is coming. We're still waiting. We were in front of the American embassy in Copenhagen just 3 days ago, and huge support. American flags, Israeli flags, Iranian flags, Danish flags. Said, Trump, help Iran. That is the best thing you could ever do for the world. Stabilizing the region. Peace, prosperity, and progress for a country that was once very progressive and prosperous.
Do you expect if the regime is overthrown that Iran will become an ally of the United States?
Absolutely, no question.
Tell me that in a sentence, please.
In very simply said, the plan is that Iran will become a secular democratic nation. The Crown Prince Shah Reza Pahlavi has offered to create a transitional government leading to free elections, democratic state, peace and prosperity, and allied with Israel and America. As we have been in the past, we see that as the only way to stability in the Middle East, stability to oil prices, and destruction of worldwide terrorism.
Okay, so it was a pro-America protest with lots of Israeli and American flags, which was even more confusing for regular everyday Danes who are kind of mad at America right now. And so they were like, wait, why are we flying American flag? What is going on here? But, they're just saying, we love America. We're grateful to President Trump for saying that he would support us. We just hope he will actually do it. And I agree with them on that. And they were there in front of the Iranian embassy, the women, with their heads uncovered. And it was cool to see. Very interesting stuff. All right, we're going to get to questions. But before we do, I just want to remind you that if you go over to chuckholton.com, that's my locals page, you can sign up to support us over there and get lots of extra content. You get monthly phone calls with me. You get access to my documentaries and some of my books, and you get early access to some of my videos. You get a written summary of every day's live with all the key points there. So if you want to go back and jog your memory or send it to somebody and tell them about it, use it as ammunition in your daily work schedule when you're having an argument with your leftist coworker. So you can get content like that by being a supporter over at chuckholton.com. And it helps to pay for my hotel rooms and keep us in the field doing this job and bringing you the truth from what's happening on the ground. That's what we try to do. So thank you to all of you who are supporters. Thank you to you who have given us tips and super chats and super thanks and stuff here on YouTube. We love all you guys. And I appreciate especially the anonymous donors who have been donating a lot of money to help our projects that we have in different places, like in Armenia, helping Iranian missionaries, and in Colombia, helping single Venezuelan mothers start businesses, and help our prison ministry, where we're going into the women's prison and bringing them the things that they're not being provided, and stuff like that. So like the gospel, just the important stuff like the gospel. So thank you for those of you who have joined us in all that. You help tremendously keep us doing what we're doing. All right, let's get over to our questions here. First question is from Genuine Joy. Question from Katie. No-fly zone over Central America. How does that affect you, Chuck? It's not there anymore. They removed the no-fly zone over Venezuela, so there's no effect whatsoever. Next question. Have we actually talked to Greenland to try to work anything out? No, we didn't. President Trump, in his first term, mentioned offhand, I ought to buy Greenland. And then he thought, you know what? I really should buy Greenland. And back then they said, no, we're not interested. And he kind of let it drop. This term, he's decided, no, this is a huge, pivotal part of my national security, geopolitical policy. We have to own Greenland. And Greenland was like, all you had to do was just come over here and tell us what you wanted, and we would have just given it to you for free. So why are you now making us your enemy? That's just dumb. That's what it is. It's just dumb. And I heard a lot of people say that today. This is so dumb. I don't understand why he's doing it. Okay, next question. Do you think a U.S. invasion of Greenland would be the end of NATO? It would be the end of NATO. And there's a lot of things that would keep that from happening. First of all, you know, the United States has 100,000 troops in Europe at bases all over Europe. And sure, Europe benefits from the protection that we provide, but we benefit as well in many ways. Number one, it's actually cheaper for us to have troops overseas than it is for us to keep them in garrison in the United States. In some cases, the countries subsidize or even pay for the bases that we have our U.S. troops on over there. So it's cheaper. But not only that, we function as a deterrent. They let us store. We have 3 brigades worth of 3 tank brigades. So we have massive numbers of tanks and trucks and helicopters and airplanes in storage in Europe, just in case there's another big world war. And we would have to bring all that stuff home. And you know, it costs more to transport it than the equipment is worth. And so it would actually be cheaper just to tell Europe they could have it, just to leave it. That's why we left all that stuff in Afghanistan, because it costs about something like $480 a pound for the U.S. military to transport equipment back to the United States. And so we were like, it's not worth it. We're just going to leave all those billions and billions of dollars in Afghanistan. If anything, we should have just destroyed it. But we would get likely kicked out of all those bases. We benefit greatly from the purchases that are made by other NATO countries, because part of the thing that NATO is more than anything is it's a standards organization. And so to be a part of NATO, every country has to agree to adhere to the NATO standard of military equipment. So they've got to buy a certain caliber of firearm. They've got to buy, certain types of planes. And almost all of those come from the United States. And so they create jobs in the U.S. because we're selling billions of dollars a year worth of military hardware to our NATO allies, F-35s. Norway's got them. Germany's got them. Everybody's got them. Even Denmark's got some, I think. And I think they have 2 or something, but they still have some. So all that would dry up. So a bunch of Americans would lose their jobs. We would have to bring home 100,000 troops, and we have to figure out where to put all those guys, because we don't, just have capacity in the United States for another 100,000 troops. Not easily, anyway. We would lose the intelligence sharing apparatus that we've built over decades with the rest of NATO. Believe it or not, we rely on the intelligence that we get from countries like Lithuania and Poland and Latvia and Estonia and Finland. They're tiny countries, but they make up part of the constellation of NATO countries that provides real-time data to the United States that helps keep America safer. So we get a lot out of our relationship with NATO. Yes, we fund the majority of NATO because we're the biggest country. It's like if you and me and Bill Gates went out to eat, we probably would not insist on paying if Bill Gates decided to pick up the check, because he's got a heck of a lot more money than we do. So, and that would be an interesting conversation, I'm sure, if you and me and Bill Gates went to dinner. But, NATO countries that are tiny, they are upping their game. They are increasing their military spending. Denmark, of all countries, is actually above the 2% of GDP target that President Trump himself set. They're spending more than 2% of their GDP on their military already. So they're exceeding the goal that President Trump set for them in his first term. So how can Stephen Miller come on and say, well, these guys are not spending enough and they're expecting us to do everything? No, it's a partnership. We're working together. This is the agreements that we've made. Okay? So, next question. Couldn't the USA and Denmark work on shared custody? We're all supposed to be allies, right? Yeah, we are supposed to be allies. We don't even need to be shared custody. If they're already willing to let us use Greenland any way we want, have as many troops there as we want, then if President Trump thinks that there's a threat coming from up there, let's open some more bases in the far north of Greenland. And then Greenlanders would be perfectly happy with that. They wouldn't have a problem with that. They might now because they're just kind of miffed, you know? I mean, it's been extremely offensive to them that President Trump would talk the way that he is. Not even consult with them. Just say, yeah, we're going to buy you. I saw there was a parody video that floated around social media when President Trump was younger, where he's in a parking garage and he comes out and he's like, wow, we don't have time to take a taxi. We just need to buy a car. And they're like, well, the nearest car dealership is far. He's like, no, I'll just buy this car right here. And there's like a soccer mom in the car with her kids. And she's like, what? You can't buy my car? And he's like, yes, I can. And he just pulls out massive wads of cash. Here, just take all this. And he gives her like $100,000 for her car. And she's like, whoa. And she takes it and runs off and leaves her kids in the car. And he's like, congratulations, kids. I just bought you, you know. And of course, it was meant to be satire. It's a joke. And President Trump actually, he wasn't president when he did it, but he actually participated in the joke. It was for Saturday Night Live or something. Well, now it's not so much of a joke because he's actually talking about buying human beings. And that's not cool. All right, next question. Do you think President Trump should fire Stephen Miller over Greenland? Not necessarily. I just think President Trump needs to think critically about this and maybe keep his mouth shut. Because what happens is he says stuff without thinking, without being fully informed. And then everybody that works for him has to scramble around to try to figure out how to agree with him without actually letting him do what he keeps saying he wants to do. Make Canada the 51st state, you know, all that kind of stuff. And Stephen Miller is very good at that. He's good at towing that line. I think the best at it is Marco Rubio. I mean, Marco Rubio is really good at supporting what the president says without making a fool of himself. Stephen Miller goes too far and makes a complete idiot of himself by going on TV and posting up all these straw man arguments. Next question. Where are we next? Thanks, Chuck. Praying for Iran. Okay, thank you for the 1999. Appreciate that too, Paul. Next, Arnold. I think we ought to try to work with them instead of just taking over them. Okay, that's a statement, not a question, but yes, I definitely agree. A landing on Greenland will get us out of NATO. Already talked about that. Yes, it would cause the collapse of NATO, and it would likely cause the collapse of any trade agreements we have with EU countries, which would, and they would probably divest themselves of the hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars of US dollars that they hold, which would cause our currency to lose a bunch of value, maybe collapse, and the US dollar would stop being the reserve currency of the world. That's like nuclear option, worst case scenario. Oh, and one other thing I didn't mention is that this is exactly what Russia wants us to do. President Trump is using Russia as an excuse, saying, oh, if we don't take it over, Russia's going to take it over. Russia doesn't have any plans to take over Greenland. But if we take over Greenland, it will be a huge win for Russia. Because why? Well, it justifies everything they've done in Ukraine. Well, yeah, we take in Ukraine because we need it. Yeah, we're killing hundreds of thousands of civilians, but who cares? We need it, right? And not only that, but it fractures NATO, and that's the big thing right there. So if Russia can talk Trump into actually trying to take over Greenland, it would be a huge win for Russia. It would completely rewrite the rules of global order with Russia and China on top. That would be a coup de grace by Russia and China against the United States. And that's one reason why I'm telling you it's not going to happen. It just won't happen. Even if Trump was dumb enough to try it, there are enough people with sense in the American government to keep that from happening. So it's not going to happen. All right, next question. Is Trump under control by Putin? Well, a lot of people posit that. I'm not going to comment on that. I don't know that he's being controlled by Putin, but it is kind of curious how President Trump just keeps doing whatever Putin wants him to do. You know, he'll get upset with Putin because he kills a bunch of civilians. And so he starts leaning more towards Zelensky and then gets a phone call from Putin. Next thing you know, Trump's bashing on Zelensky. Trump just apparently is more concerned with whoever's going to stroke his ego the most than with doing the morally right thing. And that bothers me. That's a problem. Okay. I wonder what Trump would want to call Greenland. Probably red, white, and blue land would be my guess. It's just a guess. Next question. I heard NATO was already sending troops to Greenland. Yeah, just a few for an exercise, a tabletop exercise. And it's not that they're sending troops there to counter the United States if we invade. Obviously, NATO is not going to fight the United States. But the numbers of troops they're sending is like in the single digits. Okay, so it's like, yeah, we're sending 6, we're sending 1, whatever, and they're just going there for an exercise, but also to show solidarity with Greenland. Okay, to show that no, we're not going to put up with this. And basically, well, if President Trump wants to invade Greenland, he's going to have to invade a NATO country with a bunch of NATO troops in it, and that's going to be really, really awkward. And they're right about that. Next question. I wonder if President Trump is doing this because of nefarious projects from our adversaries that involve Greenland. Well, I mean, even if there are nefarious projects involving Greenland, we don't have to take it over to counter that. Taking it over does not need to be part of that equation at all. Next question. Okay, since we're doing bills, how much are we going to charge Europe for the defense of them for the last 80 years? Well, like I said, we get a lot out of having our troops in Europe. So yes, we do spend a lot of money over there. We would spend more money on those troops if we kept them in the United States. That's one thing. What's the value of the intelligence that we share with Europe? I'm not saying that this is even, but this is the agreement that we have made over decades with NATO. We're not doing this against our will. NATO's not forcing us to put our troops in Europe. We have our troops in Europe because we want to have our troops in Europe. We need to have our troops in Europe. If we want to be able to project power across the globe, especially to the Middle East, we have to have troops in Europe. Did you know that when people got injured in Iraq and Afghanistan, they didn't get flown back to Walter Reed in the United States? They got flown to Landstuhl Air Base in Germany and went to the hospital there because it was closer and faster. We want to have those bases. The United States didn't, reluctantly, okay, I guess we'll come over and spend a bunch of money and just protect you guys. No, we asked to have our bases there. And that the reasoning for us having our bases there has not changed. Okay? So that's a moot point. That argument does not hold water. That, we're going to send them a bill for all the stuff we've done for them. That's not how it works. Next question. Trump hasn't used force against Greenland. We already talked about that, so we can skip that one. If we don't take it, Russia or China will, or Russia or China will. No, they won't. Thank you for the $9.99, but I already covered that. They're not going to take a NATO country. If they take a NATO country, whether that's Poland or Lithuania or Finland or Greenland, the same thing happens. NATO invokes Article 5, and Russia is staring down 60% of the globe's military force. And they can't stand up even to Ukraine. So there's no way they're going to be able to win against NATO. And they know that. The best thing to do to keep Russia, I mean, look, if President Trump was that worried about Russia taking over Greenland, then he ought to be sending lots of money and armaments over to Ukraine to continue to degrade Russia like they've been doing for 4 years. Russia's military is about 40% of what it was before 2022 when they invaded Ukraine. And that is very much due to the fact that NATO countries, including the United States, have been sending billions of dollars to Ukraine to give them the wherewithal to be able to degrade the Russian military. If we're worried about the Russians being a threat, then let's help Ukraine win, and Russia will never be a threat again in our lifetimes. This is the last war Russia will ever fight. They don't have the demographics to threaten us ever again. Next question. Is Greenland not allowed to make commercial agreements with foreign countries? Yeah, that's true. I mean, they can make some commercial agreements, but not military agreements. Denmark has to be the one that makes any military agreements, and with regard to Greenland right now. So again, that is changing little by little. They're giving Greenland more and more latitude all the time, because Denmark actually is fine with Greenland becoming its own country. Once they become their own country, then maybe they would be interested in more partnership with the United States. But again, we have essentially a blank check right now. Unlimited access. Here's the keys. You guys use it any way you want. So other than nuclear weapons, there's no reason for us to want Greenland, to own it. Besides, you know what? Again, are you cool with us spending $700 billion to buy it? Because that's what they're talking about. I'm not. That's a whole lot of money for a giant sheet of ice that's melting. Okay, next question. Will the Greenland citizens stay? Well, yeah, they're not leaving. They don't hate America, although they're not happy with America right now. I'll tell you what they think when I get there. I'm going day after tomorrow, and I will do a live Monday and tell you what I find. Okay? Next question. Is it better for China or Russia take it first? They won't. They won't take it. They're not going to take it. They can't. Next question. Do you think Stephen Miller belongs in the circus? I'm not impressed with Stephen Miller. Let's put it that way. Next question. Couldn't Trump just make an agreement with Greenland and NATO to have some U.S. bases there instead of wanting the whole country? We have that agreement. We've had it since 1951. We can have all the bases there we want. We used to have 17 bases. Now we only have one. That was our choice, not Greenland's choice. We could build it up again if we wanted to. Next question. Why not focus on taking back the Panama Canal? Because we don't need the Panama Canal either. And again, the Panamanians own it. We made a deal with them to give it back to them. And I think we ought to live up to our agreements. That's just my opinion. Next question. Could President Trump achieve the goals in Greenland without acquiring it as U.S. territory? Absolutely. 100%. No question. That's why this is so dumb. Next question. What state does Greenland compare to? Well, they say it's Stephen Miller there said it was the size of 1/4 of the continental United States. So it's bigger than Texas. It's the largest island in the world. But I think that's because they don't count Australia as an island. They count it as a continent. Maybe. Next question. Did Greenland give the United States mineral rights? They would be happy to negotiate with us as far as extracting minerals. They have lots of rare earth minerals. President Trump obviously would like to do that. And so maybe President Trump's calculus is that if we spend $700 billion and buy it, then we get all those rare earth minerals without having to pay for them, which would be worth, trillions. The thing is, it would not be the government of the United States that mined those rare earth minerals. It would be American companies that did it. And American companies can do it right now. They can go up there and make deals and open mines. And there are some mines that are open up there already. Okay, next question. What can be done to bring the president into reality on this particular issue? I think time is just going to we're just going to have to give it time. Because President Trump, like I said, he just says stuff. He doesn't really mean most of the stuff he says. And that's been, you can't disagree with me on that, because that's been proven true about 1,000 times during this tenure, which, that's his nature. That's his style, if you will. He even writes about it in The Art of the Deal. But this is the art of failing the deal, is what he's doing here. He's really failing at this deal. Okay. Next question what is the ETA on Greenland sovereignty? Well, they have to meet certain goals first. So it's not a firm timeline like, okay, 5 years from now, they'll be free. They could be free 5 years from now, but they'd have to become self-sufficient. So it's just a matter of helping them get self-sufficient and doing it as fast as they can. There are some elements that would really like it if they could offload Greenland. The people I talked to today at the protests are like, look, a lot of people in Denmark, they look at the $700 million a year we're giving to Greenland and go like, we'd really rather not do that. So we'd like to see Greenland kind of become its own thing. But now we're like, oh, heck no. We're not, the U.S. is not taking it. So next question. If they can make a deal with the Danes for Greenland, why not? Okay, but the Danes are saying there's no deal. If the Danes agreed and the people of Greenland agreed, then okay, let them become part of the United States. I'm not averse to Greenland becoming part of the United States, just not the way that President Trump's doing it. Again, it would have to be voted on and it'd have to be agreed to by the people who will be impacted by it. I mean, what if your home got sold to another country all of a sudden? They're like, oh yeah, well, you live in Cleveland? Well, we're going to sell Cleveland to China. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's ridiculous on its face. And it's also ridiculous for the United States to be talking about buying the people of Greenland. Okay, next question. And look, 85% of people in Greenland do not want to become part of the United States. 85%. Next question. I think Trump uses strong rhetoric to get a reaction from certain people. Yes, Paul, he does. That's right. Never mind whether they want to be part of the U.S. Do they want to be part of Russia or China? People keep bringing that up. They're not going to be part of Russia or China. How can I explain that any more clear than I already have? Okay, Russia and China are not going to take over Greenland because it's part of NATO. They would be at war with NATO. They would lose that war. That's it. And no change has to be made to keep that point true. Next question. The real question is, do they understand that population trimming in multiple forms is being unethically aimed at us, and they are ready to help us defend against it? Are you talking about NATO there, Aaron? Population trimming. Speaking of population trimming, there was a incident back in the 1960s, I believe, where the Danish, without the consent of women in Greenland, so the Inuit women, the Danish were concerned that the Inuit women were being too fertile. And so they said, okay, we're going to provide free female checkups for all the women over there. They brought all these women in, and without telling them what they were doing, they inserted intrauterine devices, IUDs, inside these women to keep them from being able to have babies. And that only came out much later. So that's a stain on Denmark for sure. Some people are using that as an excuse. Denmark doesn't deserve Greenland. Well, the courts have said that they do. And the United States has said in the past that they do. Look, no country is lily white. The United States actually gassed American troops with nerve agent without their consent or knowledge to test what nerve agent would do in a tropical environment. They did that on the Pearl Islands in Panama. And that's not all that long ago, like the 1950s, late 1950s, they did that, 40s or 50s, I think. Nobody's lily white here. But anyway, next question. I thought Greenland was just an ice-capped island belonging to the Dutch and not a country. Well, it's not a country. It is an ice-capped island belonging to the Dutch. You're correct. Next question. $100K for each Greenlander, $3 billion total. What do you guys think? Greenlanders have already said they won't take that. Some of them might. You might be able to change some of their minds, but it'd have to be orders of magnitude more than that to get them to change their minds. And still that doesn't change the fact that it belongs to Denmark and Denmark would have to agree to it. Because Greenland doesn't have the right yet to make those kinds of agreements without Denmark. Next question. Does it look like the majority of Danish are opposed to sell Greenland? Yes, it does. Next question. Chuck, your opinion, if someone feels like they hold a stake in the end result, would they not be more willing to work toward a successful solution together with the USA? Sure. I guess what you're getting is that the United States ought to encourage Greenland to become its own country, and then we can deal directly with them. And maybe that's what we'll do. It's a good question. Next, Johnson says, if you have to eat your hat, will you do it on a live stream? And do you think you would need any condiments to help you get it to go down? Yeah, I definitely would need some condiments to let it go down for sure. But I'm not going to have to eat it because it's not going to happen. Next question. Is it possible that POTUS Trump is simply conducting a probing action to test responses similar to military probing the perimeter? I guess you could call it that. Doesn't make it any more moral. Next question. What if China uses the same national security rationale to take over Taiwan? They would. How could we say that China doesn't have the right to take Taiwan? Because they need it. They need the computer chips that Taiwan makes. They need it. So they'll take it. It would be hypocritical of us to tell China they can't take Taiwan if we went ahead with this. Next question. Do you think we will attack Iran? Yes, I do think that we will attack them at some point. Next question. Do you think if they allowed us to have nuclear weapons there, President Trump would change his mind? Maybe. Maybe he would. And that's certainly up for debate. That's all. And they're our friends. That's all we have to do is just send a delegation over here and say, hey, we really need to station some nukes up there. And so let us do it. And they probably would be willing to negotiate with us on that. Majority of NATO countries cannot defend themselves. Yes. Why would they defend us? Well, they did. They all came to our defense in Afghanistan and Iraq. Many people don't know that. My last trip to Afghanistan in 2019, there were like 2,000 U.S. troops and 9,000 troops from NATO. They had far more troops there than we did. Okay? And again, all of them, I think, lost soldiers in that fight. They all had people killed defending us. They could have easily said, that's not our war. 9/11 didn't happen to us over here. And it's not, Russia's not invading NATO countries and America's not being invaded. So we're not going to participate. You understand, all of what Article 5 says is that NATO countries will help. They will consider an attack on one country to be an attack on all. But each country gets to decide how it responds and if it responds. And not every country, and the United States has already said that if NATO countries get attacked in Europe under President Trump, we're not going to help them, even though we're obligated to do so under Article 5 of NATO. So NATO countries didn't have to send troops to Afghanistan and Iraq, but they did. That's the important part. And we need to remember that. We ought to honor that, not by trying to make them our enemies now. It's really sad when you see a Danish guy with one leg, with a prosthetic leg, walking down the street, and you just wonder, did he lose that leg in Afghanistan fighting for America's war? That rubs me the wrong way. How would controlling Greenland help with the Golden Dome system? Well, it would give us so controlling Greenland wouldn't make any difference. If we have a concern and we're trying to put together the Golden Dome system, then we're going to want to station more anti-missile defense in Greenland. But we don't need to own it to do that. We just have to tell Greenland, hey, we're going to station some more missiles up there. And they go, okay, sure, great. Protects us too. We wouldn't have any problem with it. So controlling Greenland doesn't matter. We could do it anyway. Next question. How about giving some mining rights to the people of Greenland so they can be generationally wealthy? And is there gold as well as rare earths in Greenland? There's probably some gold, but more importantly, there's some natural gas and oil up off the north, in the North Pole area up there. Next question. Any chance we can get folks to stop being armchair generals and pray for our leaders? This is all out of hand and overwhelming. It's a very good point. What's your take on Canada getting in bed with China? I think they're doing it to tweak President Trump. I think that if President Trump had gone in with a carrot instead of a stick against Canada, we'd be having discussions with Canada over, business development, and Canada would not be talking to China. But I look, Canada is a sovereign country. They can do what they want. And I really, really think that they wanted to show that handshake with President Xi so they could take a picture of that and send it to President Trump and say, yep, back at you, President Trump. Are there polar bears in Greenland? Don't think there are a lot of polar bears in Greenland. It's a good question. Do the underground bases built during the Cold War still exist in Greenland? Yeah, they're there. They're frozen in time and they've been abandoned for decades. But the Camp Century is the one you're talking about. It was underground city. It's still there. And you can go visit it. I would love to go visit it while I'm there, but it's way out. It's really remote. I don't have time. Next question. Portugal has 35 fighter jets. How can they help us? Well, 35 jets is 35 jets. That's 35 more jets than that we can add to our list. They also help in terms of cost if they're helping us with something. That's kind of a no-brainer. Okay, next question. What do we, the entire West, do if China cuts all of our access to their market and rare earth metals, et cetera? We need to think about that real hard, and we need to be developing alternative relationships with and places in the United States to mine that stuff wherever possible. And President Trump is working on that, and kudos to him for doing so. And that's going to be a long process to ramp up, but they're going full steam ahead on that for sure. Could the Greenland situation be just a distraction? None of this makes much sense. Maybe. Distraction from what is the question. Greenland has been Danish since Viking days. Well, the Vikings were from Norway, so okay. Denmark has claimed Greenland since about 14th century, more or less. What are Italy and France's positions regarding Greenland? Yeah, they're saying we will send troops to defend Greenland against the United States attack. President Macron is a moron, and he doesn't like President Trump anyway. So of course they're doing that. Chuck, are you working for MSNBC now? Absolutely not. I am allowed to call the shots as I see them, and just because I happen to this time be calling shots and saying that President Trump is wrong does not make me a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. It just makes me a very disenfranchised Republican, is what it makes me. So that's offensive, Mike. Get bent. How do you know that Russia doesn't want to take over Greenland? Where's the proof of that? Well, there's no proof that they do want to take over Greenland, but the proof is not so much the positive proof that Russia wants to do it. It's the negative proof in that Russia can't do it because it's a NATO country. They can't take over Greenland just like they can't take over Poland, because if they try, they will be at war with NATO. And Russia can't beat NATO. They know it. We know it. Everybody knows it. Russia is not strong enough, especially after 4 years of war in Ukraine, to even beat Ukraine, much less all of NATO. So we don't need proof that Russia wants to take over Greenland or not. All we need is the proof that Greenland belongs to NATO, and that's proof enough. Next question. Is it true that China is building large numbers of icebreakers? Yes, and so is the United States. The U.S. has spent a couple $2 billion ordering, I think, 11 new icebreakers, and that's all part of this strategy to control more territory or more of the shipping lanes up in the north. Chuck, most of the good people live in the deep south of Greenland, since most is ice. What's the use for us? We can't do much, can we? Well, we're not going to be growing corn there, and we're not going to be raising cattle up there or anything like that. The only strategic reason we have to be in Greenland is because it's the closest we can get to Russia, and so it's the earliest warning we would get if Russia fired missiles at us over the North Pole. That's all. Do you think it's going to be a Cold War in Greenland? Well, it doesn't matter if the war is kinetic or not. It's going to be cold in Greenland because it's ice. It's cold. Are you saying the U.S. will kill Greenlanders if we take over like Russia? Well, I don't think we'd have to. Greenlanders don't have the wherewithal to defend themselves against the United States. But there might be some that stand up to us, and then we would probably kill them. Next question. Whatever happened to bipartisanship? Well, this is actually a pretty bipartisan issue. Most, I would say, all Democrats and some Republicans are against the idea of the United States unilaterally taking over Greenland. Next question. How much of an impact do you think the Greenland situation will have on support for the Trump administration? I'm pretty disappointed in his handling of this myself. I heard that from a lot of people, and I think every time Trump does something that's stupid like this, it hurts his chances, or it hurts our chances of maintaining control in the midterms and beyond. And that's not good. And that's why I am critical of President Trump over this. Doesn't make me a Democrat. It makes me worry that the Democrats are going to be able to take over, because so many people are like, what the heck is he doing? What's wrong with him? Okay. Next question. What do you say to those who believe President Trump is a true racist? I don't think that's true at all. I just think he's not very good at geopolitics in some cases, but I don't think he's a racist. How does Trump's Greenland stance hit with J.D. Vance's attitude about Europe? I think J.D. Vance is having an outsized influence on President Trump in regards to NATO. And J.D. Vance is he's very toxic and hostile toward our allies in Europe. And I get it. He's against the leftism. He's against the globalism. And many countries in Europe are leftist, globalist run. But if you spend any time there, like I do, you'll meet tons of people who are not leftists. They're conservatives. They would be called conservatives in the United States. They like America. They like President Trump. They're not down with globalism. That's why you've seen a shift in European politics to the right over since 2015. That's why Giorgia Meloni and in Italy, that's why the AfD in Germany has actually gained so much power. That's why we've seen right-leaning people win or almost win, even in France, because people are tired of the leftism. They're tired of the open borders. They're tired of the globalism. And so beating up on Europe is not a smart strategy for the United States. We should be giving those people some love and encouraging those people, not galvanizing them against us because J.D. Vance can't keep his trap shut. Next question. Thank you for the $2. Appreciate that. What happens if the U.S. invades Greenland and the EU drops $2.2 trillion in U.S. debt? Well, I already explained that, so let's move on. Why is Trump taking so long to hit Iran again, or at least protect them? Because he got a phone call from Turkey and Qatar and Saudi Arabia saying, don't do that. Don't attack Iran. Those guys don't like Iran, but they also don't want Iran to fall because they like not liking Iran, if that makes any sense. Next question. I just found your channel. Who are you? Short bio. I'm a former U.S. Army Ranger who has been a war correspondent since 2003. And so I've been to every war and disaster, major war and disaster around the globe for the last 2 decades, and try to bring that experience and everything to you to explain global geopolitics from a military standpoint, explain how the military works, and bring the experience that I have over decades into the conversation. Okay. Next question. If there is a world war, could Trump be forcing NATO to spend more on defense of Greenland? More of a fake out? If so, it's working. Maybe. Who knows? If there is a World War III, shouldn't America and Russia be allies? No, America and Russia should not be allies. We have diametrically opposed worldviews. And if you believe otherwise, you've been a victim of Russian propaganda. And that's all I'll say about that. Let's move on. Do you think Trump has written off NATO and Europe? Could it be he doesn't see that alliance as prosperous for the U.S., given Europe's condition? If that's the case, then we should be pulling our troops out of Europe, because if we break up NATO, they will kick us out anyway, maybe confiscate our equipment. I mean, it's going to be ugly. It'd be really, really bad. Question, does Canada have any military bases to watch China and Russia up in the Northwest Territories of Canada, et cetera? Yeah, I believe they do. And of course, we've got bases in Alaska that are watching Russia as well. I thought the USA was in in debt. So more debt? Yeah, we're in a lot of debt. So yeah, $700 billion would be pretty bad. That'd be a lot of debt for us to pick up. We'd have to put it on a credit card, which would not be good. Would writing a letter to the President of the United States make a difference in this day and age? I doubt it. Is Trump concerned about installing Golden Dome hardware in a foreign country? Well, like I said, I mean, they've given us carte blanche. We wouldn't have to give them access to our base. We wouldn't have to let them come in and, play with the buttons. What does this button do? We wouldn't have to do that. That's all stuff we can negotiate. We don't have to own it for that. With all the potential benefits of being a territory or a state, do you think the low percentage of Greenlanders wanting to be part of the U.S. is because of the decreasing stability of the U.S.? Partially so. Nobody knows what Trump's going to do next. He's so unpredictable that, and he tends to flip-flop so much that really spooks our allies and emboldens our adversaries. That's a real problem for sure. Will polar bears become U.S. polar bears? I guess if we take it over, they would be U.S. polar bears, but nobody's asked them. Are you familiar with the board game of Risk? If so, does it seem like President Trump is handling this like he's playing Risk? He's certainly playing games. Is Trump a Christian? Is Russia a Christian nation? No, absolutely not. Are there Christians in Russia? Yes. Is Russia a Christian nation? No, not in the slightest. And if you believe they are, you are a victim of Russian propaganda. You should go get your head examined. Is what Trump is doing, if he annexes Greenland, and is it imperialism? And is it not if he buys it? If he annexes it, that's imperialism. If he buys it, you could make a case it's imperialism as well, I think. Okay, last question. How can we pray for you? This is all getting hard for you as you try to fight the fight of truth. Just pray that I'll have discernment and wisdom about where to go, who to talk to, what stories to tell. I have to make a decision here shortly about my next trip after this one. And I can't give you a lot of details on it just yet, but I'm praying because it's to a pretty hot area that I would likely be in right on the front lines doing some pretty dangerous things. And so I'm praying that God will give me peace if that's what I'm supposed to do, that He'll make it clear to me if I'm supposed to go or not, and especially make it clear if I'm not supposed to go. So if you want to pray for me, please be praying that God would give me the discernment to know where I should go and where I shouldn't, to be able to come home to my wife when this is all over. Okay. Well, thank you very much for watching, folks. I'm going to end it there. I appreciate all of you. Please do go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there. Again, you get lots of extra content. Also, we have a trip going to Panama. If you want to join me and my wife in Panama in April of this year, April 9th through the 13th, we're going to be doing a retreat in Panama for hot zonians. We've got a couple rooms left. If you're interested, send an email to info@holtonnews.com and you can get more information about that. So info@holtonnews.com to get more information. Also, there's a graphic there. You can go to the website that's listed there. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching. I'm going to go get some supper and try not to freeze to death over the next couple of days. I'm going to be here in Copenhagen tomorrow. Probably won't go live unless there's some compelling thing to talk to you about. And we'll see you Monday from Greenland. So make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned. Take care.